Rajesh wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as the scorching afternoon sun beat down on his small fruit cart. For 15 years, he had occupied the same corner on Marketplace Road, selling oranges to anyone who would stop. His cart was nothing special, just wooden planks on wheels, painted a faded blue that had once been vibrant. The oranges, however, were always fresh, always sweet, carefully selected each morning from the wholesale market before dawn. Rajesh took pride in his work, even though it barely provided enough to feed his wife Meera and their 2 children, Priya and Arun. They lived in a single room on the outskirts of the city, where the rent was cheap and dreams felt distant. What set Rajesh apart from other vendors wasn't his location or his prices, it was his honesty. While other sellers used rigged scales or hid rotten fruit beneath the good ones, Rajesh never cheated anyone. If an orange had a soft spot, he'd point it out and offer a discount. If his scale tipped even slightly in his favor, he'd add an extra piece of fruit to balance it out. His regular customers appreciated this integrity, though it meant his profits were thinner than those of his less scrupulous competitors. "Papa, why don't we have money like other families?" little Arun had asked him once. Rajesh had knelt down, looked his son in the eyes, and said, "Because we choose to sleep peacefully at night, Beta. That's worth more than all the money in the world." On this particular afternoon, business was slow. The heat had driven most people indoors, and Rajesh had sold only a fraction of his usual amount. He was considering packing up early when he noticed an elderly woman approaching slowly, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. Her sari was clean but patched in several places, and her face was etched with a kind of weariness that comes from a lifetime of hardship. She stopped at his cart and looked longingly at the bright oranges, her fingers gently touching one. "How much, Beta?" she asked softly. When Rajesh told her the price, her face fell. She opened a small cloth pouch and counted out a few coins, not nearly enough for even a single orange. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "My grandson is sick with fever. The doctor said citrus would help, but I don't have enough." She turned to leave, her shoulders sagging with defeat. "Amma, wait," Rajesh called out. Something in her eyes reminded him of his own mother, who had passed away years ago. He quickly filled a bag with 6 of his best oranges and walked over to her. "Please take these for your grandson." The woman protested, but Rajesh insisted, pressing the bag into her hands along with the few coins she'd offered. "Use this money to buy him some medicine," he said gently. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks as she blessed him repeatedly, touching his feet despite his protests. As she walked away, Rajesh returned to his cart, not thinking much of what he'd done. It felt natural, right? He didn't know that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. 3 days after his encounter with the elderly woman, Rajesh was arranging his oranges into neat pyramids when a sleek black car pulled up beside his cart, an unusual sight in this working-class neighborhood. A well-dressed man in his 50s stepped out, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. He wore a tailored suit despite the heat, and a gold watch glinted on his wrist. Rajesh straightened up, suddenly conscious of his own worn clothes and calloused hands. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like some oranges?" he asked politely. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked around the cart slowly, examining everything with intense scrutiny. He picked up several oranges, testing their weight, checking their color and firmness. Rajesh felt nervous under this inspection, wondering if he'd somehow offended this important-looking person. "Tell me about yourself," the man said finally, his voice surprisingly warm. Confused but respectful, Rajesh shared his story, how he'd been selling oranges for 15 years, how he'd learned the business from his father, how he supported his family with honest work. The man listened intently, nodding occasionally. Then he asked something unexpected. If you could make more money by cheating just a little, say, using a faulty scale or mixing in some inferior fruit, would you do it? Rajesh didn't hesitate. "No, sir. My father taught me that a man's reputation is his most valuable possession. Money comes and goes, but once you lose people's trust, you can never truly get it back. I'd rather earn less and sleep well than earn more and live with guilt." The man smiled, and something shifted in his expression. 3 days ago, you gave oranges to an elderly woman who couldn't pay. Why did you do that? Rajesh felt his heart skip. How did this stranger know about that? She needed them for her sick grandson, sir. It seemed like the right thing to do. The man nodded slowly, pulling out his wallet. Rajesh expected him to buy some oranges, but instead, the man handed him a business card. My name is Vikram Malhotra. I own Malhotra Fresh Foods, one of the largest fruit distribution companies in the country. That elderly woman was my mother. Rajesh's mouth fell open in shock. Your mother? But she seemed so poor? Vikram finished. Yes, she often dresses simply and goes out to see how people treat her when they think she is nothing. She's been testing people for years, trying to find someone with true character. And you, Rajesh, passed her test. Vikram explained that he was looking for someone to manage a new retail division of his company, someone who understood quality, who valued honesty, and who genuinely cared about customers. I've been searching for 2 years, Vikram said. I've tested dozens of vendors across the city. Most failed within minutes. Some were rude to my mother. Others tried to sell her rotten fruit at full price. A few were kind but dishonest in other ways. You're the first person who not only gave her fruit for free but also gave her back her money for medicine. My mother came home that day and told me she'd finally found the person I'd been looking for. Rajesh couldn't believe what he was hearing. This felt like a dream. But sir, I'm just an orange seller. I have no education, no experience with big companies. Vikram held up his hand. You have something more valuable than formal education. You have integrity. And that, my friend, cannot be taught. That evening, Rajesh sat on the floor of his small room with Meera, the business card turning over and over in his trembling hands. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast dancing shadows on the walls as their children slept peacefully on a mat in the corner. Meera listened in stunned silence as her husband recounted the day's extraordinary events. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, tears glistening in her eyes. Do you remember, she finally said, what your father told you on his deathbed? He said that goodness always comes back, sometimes when you least expect it. I think today his words came true. Rajesh nodded, feeling overwhelmed. The salary Vikram had mentioned was more than 10 times what he earned now, enough to move to a proper apartment, to send Priya and Arun to good schools, to give his family the life he'd always dreamed of providing. But doubt crept in during the night. At 3 a.m., Rajesh lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What if he failed? What if he embarrassed himself in front of educated people? What if this was all some elaborate mistake? He'd been a street vendor his entire adult life. The thought of working in an office, wearing formal clothes, making decisions that affected a large company, it terrified him. He knew fruits, he knew customers, he knew the streets. But corporate business? That was a different world entirely. You're thinking too much, Meera whispered in the darkness, sensing his wakefulness. The man didn't offer you this position because he felt sorry for you. He offered it because he saw something in you. Don't insult his judgment by doubting yourself. Her words provided some comfort, but the fear remained. The next morning, Rajesh went to his cart as usual, but everything felt different. The familiar corner, the regular customers, the simple routine. All of it seemed both precious and limiting. Mrs. Kapoor, who bought oranges from him every Tuesday, noticed his distracted state. What's wrong, Rajesh Bhai? You seem far away today. He found himself telling her about the offer, and her reaction surprised him. Are you mad? You're actually considering not taking it. She grabbed his shoulders with surprising strength for a woman her age. Listen to me. I've been buying fruit from you for 7 years. In all that time, you've never once cheated me, never sold me bad fruit, always treated me with respect. You're one of the most honest men I know. If someone recognizes that and wants to reward it, you accept with gratitude. Your pride is good, but false humility is foolishness. By afternoon, word had spread among his regular customers about the offer. One by one, they came by, not to buy oranges, but to encourage him. Mr. Sharma, the schoolteacher, said that honesty was the foundation of all success. Young Deepak, who ran the tea stall nearby, told him that chances like this don't come twice. Even Raman, his competitor from across the street who'd always resented Rajesh's popularity, stopped by. "Take the job," Raman said gruffly. "You deserve it. You've always done business the right way, even when the rest of us didn't. Show them that good people can succeed." These words, coming from a rival, moved Rajesh deeply. As the sun began to set on what he realized might be his last day as an orange seller, Rajesh made his decision. He called the number on Vikram's card and accepted the position. His new life would begin in 1 week. Rajesh stood outside the gleaming glass building of Malhotra Fresh Foods, his reflection staring back at him from the spotless windows. He wore new clothes, a simple shirt and trousers Mira had insisted on buying with some of their savings, and carried a cloth bag containing a notebook and pen. Around him, confident people in business attire hurried in and out, speaking into phones, carrying laptops and briefcases. He felt utterly out of place, like an orange tree planted in the middle of a desert. His hand shook as he pushed through the rotating door, the air-conditioned lobby a shock after the morning heat outside. A receptionist directed him to the 10th floor, and as the elevator climbed, so did his anxiety. What had he gotten himself into? Vikram himself was waiting when the elevator doors opened. "Rajesh, welcome." His warmth immediately eased some of the tension. He gave Rajesh a tour of the facility, introducing him to dozens of people whose names blurred together in Rajesh's nervous mind. There was Priya in marketing, Suresh in logistics, Anjali in finance, all young, educated professionals who smiled politely, but whose eyes held questions. Who was this uneducated street vendor, and why was the boss treating him like someone important? Rajesh could feel their skepticism, and part of him didn't blame them. Finally, they reached a modest office with Rajesh's name already on the door, Rajesh Kumar, Quality Control Manager. Seeing his name in print on that door made everything suddenly overwhelmingly real. "Your job," Vikram explained, settling into a chair, "is to ensure that every piece of fruit we sell meets the highest standards. You'll work with our suppliers, train our staff, and most importantly, make sure we never compromise on quality for profit. I'm putting you in charge because I trust your judgment and your integrity." He handed Rajesh a thick folder. "This contains information about our current suppliers, our quality standards, recent customer complaints, and various reports. Take your time to go through everything. Ask questions. I don't expect you to know everything immediately. I expect you to learn and to apply the same principles you used at your cart to a larger scale." Rajesh opened the folder, his heart sinking. The documents were filled with technical terms, charts, and data he didn't fully understand. This was going to be harder than he'd imagined. The first week was brutal. Rajesh arrived early and stayed late, poring over documents, asking countless questions, taking detailed notes. Some employees were helpful and patient. Others were dismissive, speaking quickly in English peppered with business jargon he didn't always comprehend. He felt stupid and inadequate more times than he could count. During lunch, while others ate together in the cafeteria, Rajesh often sat alone, missing the simplicity of his cart, the friendly banter with customers, the straightforward nature of his old life. He called Mira every evening, and she listened to his frustrations, his fears, his doubts. "Remember why he hired you," she reminded him constantly. "Not for what you know about paperwork, but for what you know about character." Her faith kept him going when his own wavered. By Friday, exhausted and overwhelmed, Rajesh wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Then something happened that changed everything. On his 8th day, Rajesh was asked to inspect a large shipment of oranges that had arrived from one of the company's primary suppliers. The warehouse manager, a man named Dinesh who'd been particularly condescending toward Rajesh, assured him it was just a formality. "This supplier has been with us for 5 years. Their quality is always consistent. Just sign off on it so we can get the shipment processed." But Rajesh insisted on doing a proper inspection, just as he would have at his cart. He opened several crates, examining the fruit carefully, cutting a few open to check the inside. What he found made his stomach turn. While the top layer of oranges in each crate was perfect, the layers beneath contained Fruit that was either overripe, underripe, or showing early signs of rot. Someone was cheating, hiding inferior product beneath the good. We can't accept this, Rajesh said firmly. Dinesh's face reddened. Are you serious? Do you know how much paperwork it takes to reject a shipment this size? Besides, most of this fruit is fine. We can just pick out the really bad ones and sell the rest. Rajesh shook his head. That's not how we do business. Would you want to buy oranges that looked good on the outside but were rotten underneath? This shipment goes back, and we need to have a serious conversation with this supplier. Dinesh scoffed. You've been here a week and you're already trying to change everything? You're just an orange seller playing businessman. Let people who actually know what they're doing make the decisions. The word stung, but Rajesh held his ground. Go get Mr. Malhotra. Let him decide. When Vikram arrived and saw the evidence, his face grew stern. He immediately called the supplier, a man named Patel with whom he'd done business for years. The conversation was heated. Patel insisted it was an honest mistake, a mix-up at the warehouse. He offered a discount on the shipment if they'd accept it anyway. Vikram was tempted. Rejecting the shipment would disrupt the supply chain and potentially cost the company money in the short term. He looked at Rajesh, who stood quietly waiting. What do you think? Vikram asked. Rajesh took a breath. Sir, you hired me to maintain quality and integrity. If we accept this shipment, even at a discount, we're telling our customers that our standards can be compromised. We're also telling this supplier that cheating is acceptable if you apologize and offer a price cut. I say we reject it, we find a new supplier, and we make it clear that Malhotra Fresh Foods cannot be fooled. Vikram was silent for a moment, then nodded. Reject the entire shipment. And Patel, our business relationship is over. We'll find suppliers who respect us and our customers. After the call ended, Vikram turned to the assembled staff who'd gathered to watch this drama unfold. This is why Rajesh is here. In 1 week, he's done what some of you haven't done in years. He's put our values above convenience. Yes, this decision will cause us short-term problems. We'll have to scramble to find replacement fruit. We'll lose some money. But Rajesh is right. Our reputation is built on trust, and trust cannot be compromised. He put his hand on Rajesh's shoulder. Thank you for having the courage to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. As Vikram walked away, Rajesh noticed the changed expressions around him. The skepticism in many eyes had been replaced with something else, respect. Word of the rejected shipment spread quickly through the company. Rajesh's standing among the employees shifted dramatically. People who had dismissed him as a charity case now sought his opinion. The warehouse staff started asking him to teach them how to spot quality issues. Even Dinesh, after his initial embarrassment, approached Rajesh with newfound respect. I've been in this business for 8 years, he admitted, and I've gotten lazy. I stopped looking closely because it was easier to trust our suppliers. You reminded me why we can't do that. Rajesh appreciated the apology, but didn't gloat. Instead, he asked Dinesh to help him develop a new, more thorough inspection protocol for all incoming shipments. Together, they created a system that would prevent similar problems in the future. Emboldened by Vikram's support, Rajesh began to implement other changes. He started visiting the farms and orchards that supplied the company, something that apparently hadn't been done regularly before. There, he saw things that troubled him: workers being underpaid, fruit being harvested before it was properly ripe to meet delivery schedules, pesticides being used irresponsibly. He compiled detailed reports, complete with photographs and conversations with farmers. When he presented these findings to Vikram and the senior management team, there was resistance. We can't control how our suppliers run their operations, argued the procurement director. If we demand better labor practices and growing conditions, they'll just charge us more, and we'll have to raise our prices. Rajesh had anticipated this objection. I understand the concern about costs, Rajesh said carefully, aware that he was still the newest and least experienced person in the room. But I've been thinking about this differently. What if we didn't just demand changes? What if we helped make them happen? We could offer training, resources, even financial support to suppliers who commit to better practices. Then we market our fruit differently, not just as fresh and delicious, but as ethically sourced. There are customers who will pay more for that, I believe. He shared stories from his cart days about customers who specifically sought him out because they knew he was honest, even if his prices weren't the absolute lowest. Trust and ethics can be competitive advantages, not just costs. The room was quiet. Then Anjali from finance spoke up. Actually, the premium organic market is growing by 20% annually. If we position ourselves correctly, this could work. Over the next 3 months, Rajesh's vision began to take shape. Malhotra Fresh Foods launched a Fair Harvest program, partnering with farms committed to sustainable practices and fair labor conditions. It required significant investment and restructuring, but Vikram believed in the long-term potential. Rajesh himself traveled extensively, meeting with farmers, building relationships, sharing knowledge he'd gained from decades of working with fruit. He had a gift for connecting with people, whether they were wealthy executives or struggling farmhands, because he treated everyone with the same genuine respect. The farmers trusted him because he was one of them, someone who'd worked with his hands, who understood their challenges. Slowly, the program grew. The company's reputation began to shift. They weren't just another distributor. They were becoming known as the ethical choice. Not everyone was happy with Rajesh's success. Mohit Prasad, the former quality control manager who'd been moved to a different department when Rajesh was hired, watched with growing resentment. Mohit had worked at Malhotra Fresh Foods for 12 years, climbing the ladder through education and experience. He held an MBA from a prestigious university and had always assumed he'd eventually become a senior executive. Then this uneducated street vendor arrived and not only took a position that should have been Mohit's stepping stone upward, but also became Vikram's favorite, implementing changes and getting credit for the company's growing success. It was unbearable. Mohit began subtly undermining Rajesh, spreading rumors among the staff that Rajesh's success was just luck, that anyone could have caught that bad shipment, that the Fair Harvest program was actually Vikram's idea and Rajesh was just the face of it. The whispers reached Rajesh, but he chose to ignore them, focusing on his work instead. However, Mohit wasn't content with just spreading rumors. He wanted to actively sabotage Rajesh, to expose him as the fraud Mohit believed him to be. An opportunity came when Rajesh was scheduled to give a major presentation to a group of potential investors interested in expanding the Fair Harvest program. This was Rajesh's biggest professional challenge yet, speaking to sophisticated businesspeople who would expect data, projections, and polished delivery. Mohit knew that Rajesh, despite his growth, was still uncomfortable with formal presentations and technical business language. The night before the presentation, Mohit managed to access Rajesh's computer and deleted key files containing the data and slides Rajesh had spent weeks preparing. The next morning, when Rajesh arrived early to review his presentation one final time, he discovered the files were gone. Panic seized him. The investors would arrive in 2 hours, and all his preparation had vanished. He tried to recover the files, but they were irretrievable. Sweating and shaking, Rajesh sat at his desk, feeling defeated. This was it, the moment where he'd be exposed as inadequate, where everyone would realize he didn't belong in this world. He could give the presentation from memory, but without the data, the charts, the professional slides, he'd look like an amateur. Maybe Mohit and the other doubters were right. Maybe he was just a street vendor pretending to be something he wasn't. He was about to go tell Vikram he couldn't do the presentation when Meera called him, just to wish him luck. "The files are gone," he told her, his voice breaking. "I can't do this without them." There was a pause. Then Meera said something that cut through his panic. "Rajesh, why did Vikram hire you? Not because you could make fancy presentations. Because you know fruit, you know people, and you know right from wrong. Those investors don't need slides, they need to believe in the mission. Tell them what you told me about the farmers you've met, the changes you've seen, the future you're building. Speak from here," she said, and he knew she was touching her heart, not from a computer. Rajesh closed his eyes, breathing deeply. She was right. He'd been so focused on fitting into the corporate world that he'd forgotten his greatest strength, his authenticity. When the investors arrived, Rajesh stood before them without slides, without charts, without any of the typical business presentation tools. And he told them a story. Rajesh began his presentation by acknowledging the missing slides and data, briefly explaining the technical difficulty without mentioning his suspicions about sabotage. "But perhaps this is better," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Because I don't want to convince you with numbers on a screen. I want to tell you about people." He described Ramesh, a farmer in Punjab who'd been using harmful pesticides because they were cheaper and he was barely making enough to feed his family. When we partnered with him, we didn't just tell him to stop using those chemicals. We showed him better methods. We helped him afford organic alternatives. We guaranteed him fair prices for his produce. And you know what happened? His oranges got sweeter. His workers got healthier. His children could stay in school. That's what Fair Harvest does. It doesn't just produce better fruit, it produces better lives. He told them about Lakshmi, a widow running her deceased husband's farm, who'd been cheated by distributors for years. She was getting half the market price for her produce because she didn't have the power to negotiate. We offered her a fair, transparent contract. The first time she received full payment for her crop, she cried. She told me it was the first time since her husband died that she didn't feel helpless. Rajesh's eyes glistened as he recounted this. That's the real return on investment, not just money, though that will come. It's knowing that business can be a force for good, that profit and principle don't have to be enemies. The room was absolutely silent, everyone leaning forward, captivated. These wealthy investors had sat through countless polished presentations, but they'd never experienced anything quite like this raw, genuine appeal. Rajesh continued, sharing more stories, painting a vivid picture of the Fair Harvest program's impact. He talked about quality from the perspective of someone who'd hand-selected fruit for 20 years, who could tell by touch and smell when an orange was perfect. He discussed customer loyalty not from marketing theory, but from his experience of Mrs. Kapoor and others who'd been his faithful customers because they knew they could trust him. He spoke about the future of the food industry, not from market research, but from understanding that consumers increasingly wanted to know their food came from ethical sources. People want to feel good about what they eat, he said. They want to know that nobody suffered to bring that orange to their table. We can give them that certainty, and they will reward us with their loyalty. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, then spontaneous applause. The lead investor, a woman named Mrs. Reddy who'd built her fortune in sustainable businesses, stood up with tears in her eyes. "In 30 years of investing, I've never heard a more compelling pitch," she said. "Not because of data or projections, but because I believe you. I believe in what you're doing, and I want to be part of it." By the end of the meeting, the investors had committed even more funding than initially hoped for. As they left, several stopped to shake Rajesh's hand, to tell him how refreshing his honesty was. Vikram, who'd watched from the back of the room, approached with a broad smile. "That," he said, "was extraordinary. You turned a disaster into a triumph." Later, IT discovered that Rajesh's files had been deliberately deleted. Security footage revealed Mohit's late-night access to Rajesh's computer, and he was immediately fired. News of Rajesh's successful presentation spread beyond the company. A journalist who'd been at the investor meeting wrote an article about the street vendor who'd become a corporate executive and was revolutionizing the fruit industry with ethics-first approach. The story went viral, appearing in newspapers and online platforms across the country. Suddenly, Rajesh found himself becoming something he never sought, a symbol of hope for ordinary people trying to make it in the business world. Letters and emails poured in from other vendors, farmers, small business owners, all inspired by his story. Television programs invited him for interviews. Universities asked him to speak to their business students. It was overwhelming and somewhat uncomfortable for someone who just wanted to do good work and take care of his family. The attention brought both opportunities and challenges. Malhotra Fresh Foods saw a significant increase in customer interest, with people specifically seeking out their products because of the Fair Harvest program. Revenue grew by 35% over the next 6 months, validating Rajesh's belief that ethics could be profitable. However, the publicity also attracted critics. Some business analysts called the model unsustainable, arguing that the company was spending too much on supplier support and would eventually have to compromise or fail. Competitors spread rumors that the Fair Harvest program was just marketing, that nothing had really changed behind the scenes. These attacks bothered Rajesh, but Vikram counseled patience. Change always threatens those invested in the old way of doing things, he said. Just keep doing what you're doing. The truth will speak for itself. Rajesh's family life transformed as well. They moved to a comfortable apartment in a good neighborhood, with separate bedrooms for the children and even a small balcony where Mira could grow herbs. Priya and Arun enrolled in excellent schools, where they thrived. But Rajesh was careful to keep them grounded. Every Sunday, he took them back to his old neighborhood, to the corner where his cart had once stood. They would visit his old customers, eat at the cheap restaurants he used to frequent, talk with the vendors who were still struggling. Never forget where we came from, he told his children. This success isn't about being better than anyone else. It's about being true to our values and being blessed with opportunities. Mira sometimes worried that the pressure and publicity would change him, but Rajesh remained fundamentally the same, humble, honest, and kind. The most touching moments came when people he'd helped in small ways during his cart-selling days reappeared in his life. There was the young student he'd once given free oranges to when the boy had no money, who was now finishing medical school and credited Rajesh's kindness as inspiration to help others. There was the old man he'd helped carry groceries home years ago, who showed up at his office just to thank him and say how proud he was. There was the woman whose daughter's wedding he'd contributed fruit to when they couldn't afford it, who came to his home with sweets and blessings. These visits reminded Rajesh that karma worked in countless invisible ways, that every small act of kindness sent ripples through the world that eventually returned. He kept a journal now, writing down these stories, these connections, planning to someday share them with his grandchildren. 2 years after joining Malhotra Fresh Foods, Rajesh stood at a podium in a large conference hall, addressing a national convention of fruit vendors and farmers. Vikram had retired from active management, making Rajesh the CEO, a title that still felt surreal. Under his leadership, the company had tripled in size, the Fair Harvest program had expanded to 7 states, and hundreds of farming families had seen their lives improve dramatically. But what Rajesh wanted to talk about today wasn't his success. It was theirs, the collective power of choosing integrity over shortcuts. I'm not special, he told the audience of vendors, many of whom reminded him of his younger self. I was just a man selling oranges on a street corner. The only thing I did differently was refuse to cheat, refuse to compromise on quality, and believe that doing right would eventually lead somewhere good. He told them about that day with the elderly woman, how a simple act of kindness had changed his trajectory. But here's the truth that nobody talks about, Rajesh said, his voice strong and clear. If Vikram's mother had never come to my cart, would I regret giving her those oranges?
No.
If I'd never gotten this opportunity, would I wish I'd been more dishonest to make extra money?
No.
Because karma isn't really about rewards and punishments. It's about who you are when nobody's watching, who you are when doing the right thing costs you something. I gave those oranges away because it was right, not because I expected anything in return. That's real karma. The reward was sleeping peacefully that night, knowing I'd helped someone. Everything else was just extra. The audience was silent, absorbing this wisdom. Then Rajesh made an announcement that stunned everyone. Malhotra Fresh Foods was launching a microfinance program for street vendors, offering small loans, business training, and a direct path to become suppliers for the company. I want to create 100 more stories like mine, he said. I want other vendors to have chances to grow, to succeed, to feed their families with dignity. Not as charity, but as partners. Because I remember what it's like to count coins at the end of the day, wondering if there's enough. I remember the fear and the hope. And I want to tell you, there's a path forward, and it starts with integrity. The program would be called the Orange Cart Initiative, honoring his roots. The hall erupted in applause, many vendors with tears streaming down their faces, seeing possibility where before there had been only resignation. After the speech, an old woman approached Rajesh, Vikram's mother, who'd started this entire journey. She was more frail now, but her eyes still sparkled with sharpness. I knew, she said, taking his hand. That day I came to your cart, I knew you were different. Do you know how many vendors I visited? 43. Some ignored me. Some mocked me. Some tried to cheat me. But you saw a person, not a transaction. That's what karma really is, Rajesh. It's the universe responding to the energy you put into it. You put in compassion, you got back opportunity. You put in honesty, you got back trust. You put in hard work, you got back success. But none of it would have happened if you'd been a different person at that cart. Rajesh bowed, touching her feet in respect. You changed my life, Alma. She shook her head, smiling. No, Beta. I just recognized what was already there. You changed your own life. I was just karma's messenger. As Rajesh walked out of the conference hall that evening, his phone buzzed with a message from Mira. Arun wants to know if he can help at the Orange Card Initiative on weekends. Priya wants to study agriculture and social entrepreneurship. Your children want to follow your path. I'm so proud of the man you are. Rajesh smiled, tears blurring his vision. He thought about the journey from that small cart to this moment, about all the people whose lives had intertwined with his, about the simple choice to give oranges to an old woman who couldn't pay. Karma, he realized, wasn't just about what came back to you. It was about what you set in motion, the waves that spread out from every choice you made. His wave had started small, just kindness rippling outward from a fruit cart on a hot afternoon. Now it was touching hundreds of lives, creating opportunities, spreading hope. And it all began with one simple truth. Do good, even when it costs you, even when no one is watching. Because karma isn't a reward system. It's a mirror, reflecting back the person you choose to be. And Rajesh Kumar, former orange seller, had chosen to be a man of integrity. That choice had not only transformed his life, but had created a legacy that would ripple forward for generations.